Do you want to use Notion for your agency but are intimidated by the complexity of the software? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to implement Notion for your agency at 3 different levels of complexity. In doing so, my hope is that you will be able to be able to start using Notion today by stopping at whichever level you feel most confident with. And B, gain a deeper understanding of Notion by trying to achieve the same thing at 3 different levels of complexity. And if you stick around till the end of the video, I'll show you how you can shortcut your team's learning inside of Notion and get them to understand everything they need to know in less than a day. So as an agency looking to use Notion, the first priority we probably have is dealing with clients. So let's see how we can solve the issue of client management starting at level 1. So for most agencies, we're going to have a format that looks something like this, where we have a client A, and we have a number of tasks that we need to complete to consider their project done. Now we could have a simple setup, which is a page body, the heading of a client, and then the actual to-dos underneath. And then we could just duplicate the same setup for client B. We could do it again for client C and manage our clients this way. But the problem with this setup is that we have no way to track who is assigned each task, when the tasks are due, and really any additional information that we have about the tasks themselves. So let's get rid of this and rethink this. So I just want you to take a moment and pause the video and think about how could we get those tasks for each client in a format using Notion's features that will allow us to apply a due date, an assignee, and additional information. No, really, pause the video and think about what the solution might be. Okay, you done that? Okay, now let's go ahead and look at a solution that we would build at level 1. And what we're going to do is make use of Notion's databases. So to do that, I'm just going to do a / and that's going to bring out the text editor. And from within here, I can search databases, and I have the opportunity to create an inline database. Now this database is going to represent our tasks. And so obviously I'm going to name this task database. And essentially each of the different rows are going to be the different tasks. So we have task 1, we have task 2, and task 3, like so. Now this doesn't quite look like the setup we had a moment ago. So the next thing that we need to do is create the different groupings for each of the different clients. And the way I'm going to do this in level 1 is very simple. I'm going to come to this add button here to create a new property. I'm going to find the single select property. I'm going to rename this to client. And then I can add any client as a option here. So for example, we had client A. I'm just going to add by hitting create. I can drag this down here to make all of these tasks for client A. And then for example, if I wanted to again add task 1 to 3 here, I can then add a second option in this select property for client B. And so now we can see we have at least a preliminary divide between tasks for client A and tasks for client B. Now, if I wanted to make this a little bit clearer, I can now use the fact that I have this select property to start to group these tasks. And the way I do that is I come up to these dots here, and that's going to open up the view options. And if I come to this group option, I can now choose the client tag property, and that's now going to group my tasks by client A and client B and look a lot more similar to what we had in that first setup. So that looks great, but now let's actually take advantage of the fact that we have these tasks in a database and start adding that additional information. So the first thing we wanted to do is have the ability to assign a due date for each of the tasks. So for that, again, I'm going to come to this plus symbol here and open up the properties, and I'm going to choose the date property. I'm just going to rename this to due date. And now I have for each of the tasks, I can say when they are due. So for example, this one might be for tomorrow. This one might be for the end of the month. This one might be for the 10th of May. And basically each of the tasks have their own dedicated due date. We also wanted to see who would be assigned each of the tasks. So as you might guess, we'll come to this plus symbol here. We can choose the person property this time, rename this to assignee. And now we have a way to assign task 1 to me. We can assign task 2 to John Smith and task 3 to Rachel. Now, one thing I like to do with assignees is actually come up to the property itself and just hit edit property. And here I like to set a limit for one person. This now means that if I come into any of the assignee properties and try to add an additional person, so for example, add John to this task, it's just going to replace this assignee with John and kick me out. The logic behind this is for each of our different tasks, we ultimately want to have one person responsible. As soon as we have multiple people assigned to a task, essentially no one has ultimate ownership over it, and so it will eventually not get done. The final thing we want to do is just have an area for overall information that we might want to add to these tasks. And to achieve that, what we could do is come to the actual page bodies, and within the page body, we could actually just write any information that we like. But what I would like to do is actually have an additional property that we can have here at this overall view level, so that anyone that's looking at all of the different tasks that they have to get done can see any of the information that has been put there for them straight away. So to do that, again, I'm going to add a new property, and this time I'm just going to choose a simple text property, and I'm just going to call this additional info. So now inside of this property, we can add anything that we think will give the person we're assigned this task just a bit more context. So this could be something like a definition of done when we consider this task complete. So for example, for task 1, it might be that we are asking them to send the client an invoice, and the definition of done is when the client successfully receives the invoice. Or additionally, we might actually link out to any of our SOPs or our standard operating procedures, the instructions on how to complete a particular process, so that if someone is doing this for the first time, they can basically read up on the way that we like to do things correctly. Having it as a text property allows us to have the flexibility to link out to different things or to have actual written information in the text property, and that's why I've chosen it for this particular use case. Now, the final thing we need to add, which we had in the previous setup, is the ability to check off when a task has been done. Now, we could come and add a property and choose the checkbox property, and just like this, we now basically have this and we can check off the different tasks. But instead of that, I would actually like to be able to have the ability to see when someone is actively working on a task, or if we have decided to actually get rid of a task because we're not looking to do it anymore. So instead of the checkbox, which I'm now going to delete, I'm going to come to the properties again, and I'm actually going to choose the status. And so now already in the statuses, I have a not started option, which basically acts as a kind of backlog. We haven't actually planned to start working on this, so we're just thinking about doing it. We have the in progress, so this is something we've actively planned and we're doing. We have the done option, so that's been marked off as complete. And then I'm just going to add a new one by hitting edit property, and in the complete section, I'm going to choose archive, just so in case we have a particular task that again we didn't want to do in the end, we can mark it off as archive, and so we know we're no longer working on it, but we didn't actually complete it. So as you can see, just by simply adding these different properties and grouping them by this select property, we've taken that original setup and given it the ability to have additional information alongside the tasks. Now, we could stop here, but I still want to use the advantages that we have with the task being in a database. And this time I actually want to create some separate views to see this information in different ways. So at the moment, we just have this in a simple table view. We've already edited the fact that it is being grouped by the options, but we haven't applied a filter of any kind, and we haven't applied a sort of any kind. So for this first view, I just want to show any of the tasks that are yet to be done and basically get rid of any of the tasks that have been marked off as complete. So what I'm going to do is first of all name the view to what we expect it to show. So this is going to say to do, so tasks that are still to be done. And I'm also going to give it an icon of a open checkbox to basically represent that. I'm also going to tuck away this task's title, because I'm going to instead rename this with a heading 3 tasks, like so. This is just a bit of an aesthetic thing, but something I like to do. And now what we need to do is filter out any tasks that have been completed. So again, we're going to come to this filter option here. We're going to choose the status property. And in the statuses, we're going to say that the status is not complete, which is going to cover both tasks that are marked as done or tasks that have been archived. And I'm going to hit save for everyone, so anyone that is inside the workspace has this filter working for them. So just to show you, if we was to mark off that first task that was due tomorrow, if we was to say that this has been done, you'll now see that that clears from this view. And so this is just showing the things that are yet to be done. Now, as we have a to-do view, I also just want a done view so we can also check on the things that have been marked off as done. So for example, if we have assigned something to someone and they mark it off as done, we might want to take a look at that task and make sure it really has been done. So to do this, what I'm going to actually do to save some time is click this first view and choose the duplicate option. That's going to bring over the view with the different filters and groupings, and then I can edit it from there. And I'm doing this because obviously I'm doing the reverse, and so I only have to tweak a few things. So the things I'm going to tweak is the title of the view. So this is called done. I'm going to give this a checkbox icon like so, and then I'm going to change the filters. And instead of saying that status is not complete, I'm going to say the status is complete. And so now I've got one view for the tasks that are done and one view for the tasks that are yet to be done. The final view I'm going to add here, and of course I could add many, many more, but the final one I'm going to add is a view for anyone who wants to just see the tasks that they have been assigned and sort of cut through the rest of the noise. So to do this, again, I'm going to duplicate from the to-do view because I only want to keep or change a few things. I'm going to move this into the middle here, and I'm going to change this to mine. And again, just change the icon so it makes sense. Now, the filter rules at the moment are showing that the status is not complete, but I'm actually going to add a second filter by coming here. I'm going to say assignee, and then we can see we have assignee contains, and I could choose someone who is inside the workspace, so a specific person, or I can use this relative filter term, which is me. And so essentially what this is going to do is for any of the tasks that have been assigned to me, when I'm looking and logged into this workspace, I will see my tasks. So if John came into the workspace, he would see his tasks. If Rachel came into the workspace, she would see her tasks. It's a relative term based on who is logged in and who is looking at the view. So we can't see anything now because I haven't been assigned anything that is currently due. But if I was to, for example, assign myself this one here and this one here, when I go over to this view, I'll now just see, I've got 2 tasks for client B that I need to get done. So we've officially completed level 1 and created a database where we can manage and organize all of the different tasks across our clients. Now let's graduate to level 2 and add a second layer of complexity to make this a little bit more powerful. Now this setup is great, but I am a little bit restricted by the fact that I can only see the tasks that are belonging to each client by seeing them in this grouped view. There's no way for me to actually click into this actual client A and basically see just the things for client A in any sort of easy way. So how could I actually start to group each of these tasks within their own client page in a way that is automated and doesn't mean I have to set up new filters every single time? Now again, really pause the video, take some time to think about this, and then unpause it when you're ready for the solution. Okay, you ready? The answer is that we're actually going to bring in a second database for our clients. So to do this, I'm going to just come to the top of the page. I'm going to add that heading and call this clients. And again, I'm going to do that / command so I can create a new database. And inside the database, I'm going to call this clients. So now each of the rows inside of this database are going to represent a client. So we're going to have client A, client B, and client C. Now, as the database is itself alone, it can't really do anything. It can just show the fact that we have these different clients, but it is not connected to these tasks in any way. So to connect both of the databases, we're going to use one of Notion's more advanced features, which is the relation property. To add a property, again, I'm going to use this plus symbol here. And within the properties, I'm going to search for this relation option. When I add this, it's going to ask me to relate my client's database to any of the existing databases inside of my workspace. And for our example, we want to use this one here. And then it's going to ask if I want this to be a two-way relation, and I want to say yes. So I'm going to toggle this on, and then on the task database, it's asked me what I want the property to be called, and I want it to be called clients, which is fine. So I'm going to add this relation here, and then I can come out. So now what this is going to allow me to do is if I come to the task database, I can actually, I'll keep the tag for now, but what I'll do is I'll add in the relation property here, I'm going to say that this is for client A, And again, I'm just going to use this drag to fill out that option here. And for the client B, I'm going to come to the relation property here and choose client B and connect to the database like this. And again, drag these options down. And so now what you see is in the relation, we can see we have client A and client B. We can now get rid of this particular property. And what we can also do is regroup the options by grouping it by the client instead. So I can see client A and client B, but also what we can see up in the client's database is it's relating it and reflecting these task database entries here as well. Now that's good, but it doesn't really solve the issue of wanting to be able to essentially click into any of these client pages and see the tasks. We can see them here when we open up a page up at the top, but it's not super clear. We can't see any of the other properties. So how do we solve this? Well, what we're going to do is actually open up this client A page as a full page, and we're going to come to customize layout at the top here. And when we click that, that's going to open up Notion's new layout builder. Now inside of here, I can basically manipulate the properties. I could take this entire property group and move it to this panel view here. I can also choose to basically pin properties if I wanted to bring this back up. But what I can also do is if I come to page settings, you'll see now here I have the option to choose tabbed. And when I choose tabbed, what it's going to do is first of all create a content tab by default, which is basically just going to be the actual database page body itself. So we need that, we can't get rid of that, but that's fine. But what we can also do is hit this add option here, and we can actually add some database views from any database from across our workspace, but particularly ones that have been related to this database. So you can see here, because we've already got that tasks relation, if I click this like so, it's going to bring in our task database as a view. And if I come to the filters, it's automatically filtering this task database to show only clients that are pertaining to this page. So essentially from the task database, find any tasks that have this client A tagged when it's inside this client A page. So it's a sort of self-referential filter. Don't worry about the terminology, but essentially this tabs now does it for you. So it works nicely. So now if I hit apply to all pages, we can now see inside of our client A, we can see task 3 and task 2, and we can see it within this view. And in the content, we can add any additional details about the actual overall client or client project. Now I'm going to come back up to the customize layout. And again, just like we did in the level 1 section where we basically created different views to show different things, we're going to do the same thing, but for this tabs inside of the client project. So first of all, what I'm going to do is rename this and call this to do and choose a checkbox. And I'm going to come to the filters, and we've got that self-referential filter, but the second filter I'm going to add is that the status, again, is not done. And then what I'm also going to do is come to the actual page itself, and I'm just going to shrink some of these columns and rearrange them to what I want to see. Because this already lives in the client A, I don't actually need to see this relation, so I'm going to hide this. Just going to move this about, and just like that looks good to me. So we can say that this is done. And then again, I'm going to choose the view and duplicate it to get the same view again. And I'm going to rename this to done. And as you might have anticipated, come to the filter and say that the status is done. So now we have a to-do view and a done view. And again, I could add as many views as I like that I want to see that would be helpful. One thing to note, and as you can see, when we say apply to all pages, this means that the structure that we have created of these different tabs and these different views is going to be the same for all of the different clients inside of this database. So for client B now, if we come here, we've got the same to do done. So these views are the same across all of the different database pages. To take full advantage of this, what I also want to do is, again, like the task database, add some additional information to the client's database that would be helpful. So first of all, the tasks relation itself, I'm just going to hide in this particular view because I don't really want to see that. But what I will do is actually add a new property and use a rollup property. Again, a rollup property is one of our advanced features, but what we can now do is call this progress. And basically what the type of the rollup does is it allows you to select any of your existing relations. So we can choose the task relation, and then it allows you to bring in or roll up any of the properties from within that task relation database. So I'm going to bring in the statuses. And as you can see, first of all, now it's just showing the originals. So from task 2 and task 3, it's showing me that they're not started. But what I could instead do is go to this calculate option, choose percent per group, and complete. And then I can also do this bar option here. And so now I'm seeing client A has 0% of them are complete. But if I was to mark task 2 as done, now you can see 50% is complete. So now I've got a bit of a progress bar for each of my client projects. I could also come here and, for example, add an overall deadline to this particular project using the date property. I might also like to add a project owner using the person property. And now just by doing this, I have a dedicated database for each of my clients with their own information. And what I can also do is come into each of the databases and see which tasks need to be done. So we have completed level 2. We've started to relate databases together so that we can have dedicated client pages with the tasks inside. Now let's graduate to level 3 and add our final level of complexity to this build. So we have our clients and we have our tasks within each of our clients. But one final problem we might come against is the fact that we have to manually add new client tasks every time we create a client project. So for example, if I had client D, I would have to come in here, create client D, assign the owner, the deadline, and then within the tasks, I would have to say, okay, we have task 1, task 2, task 3. And in some cases, so for example, when you're doing your onboarding, lots of these tasks will be the same every time. And so this manual entry really is something that we could probably avoid. So again, I want you to pause your video for a final time and think about how we can overcome this issue of manually adding tasks to Notion and come back when you have thought of a potential solution. Okay, are you ready? Let's dive into the solution, and what we're going to do is go to probably our most advanced feature in Notion and start to use their native automations. So to access automations on a Notion database, we come to this Thunderbolt icon here, and that opens up the automation modal, and here we can create a new automation. So what I'm going to do is just add a simple onboarding automation that all of our tasks or all of our clients need when we're onboarding. So we'll call this onboarding automation. Now, to make this very simple, what I'm going to basically say is when any new page is added to this client's database, so when a new client is added, that is the trigger. And then the action is that we are going to add a page to, and we're going to add a page to our task database. So we're basically going to, when a new client is added, we're going to add a task. Now this task, for example, would be task 1. And we can add any information we want to this. So for example, we could say what the additional information is. So this is an SOP. We could also say if it's always the same person every single time. So let's say it's always me that completes task 1. We can put the assignee here. But the most important thing we need to do is make sure that this task doesn't just sit on its own, but actually relate it to this client so that it lives within that client page. So to do that, we hit edit property, find the client's relation. And then from within here, we're basically going to choose this trigger page option. So what this means is when a page is added, that is identified as the trigger page. And so a task is created and it's related to that trigger page. So if I just enable this for now, you'll see this in action. If we create a new client, so client D, that should hopefully trigger the automation. And so now when we open up client E and come to the to-do, we can see we have task 1 with myself as being assigned and that SOP being attached. Now that's good, but what about if we have tasks where we want to set the due date automatically as well? So we know from onboarding, when we start our onboarding, typically on the first day we do this, on the second day we do this, on the third day we do this. How do we actually achieve that in Notion? Well, what we need to do is find the due date property first of all. And what we can do is set this to a particular date, but that's not very helpful because obviously this automation will soon become outdated and it's not always going to be the same date for every client project. So instead, what we need to do is come to this custom formula option. And what we can basically use is the date add and date subtract function to basically add days on or off of a particular date that we're referencing. The easiest way to do this would be to say that we have the date add option here. And as you can see, we need to find a date. So the dates that we can use is the date that this automation was triggered. So the date the client project or the client was created in the database. Then we need to do a comma. We need to say how many days you want to add to it. So let's say 1 day. like so, and then we can hit save. And then when we hit done, what you'll now see is if we add a client F and we open up this client, we now have that this task 1 has been assigned to me, and it's been set to April 16th because we triggered this automation, or the client was created on the 15th. Now that's okay, but what if the official start date of the project isn't actually when we create the client project? Well, what we then need to do is add a date in the database to identify when the official start date is. So to do that, I'm just going to add a simple date property, and I'm going to call it start date and move it over here. So now what we can do inside of this automation, if we come to edit, is in the due date property, we'll open this up. And instead of saying date add from the date triggered, we can say date add from the start date. We can find the trigger page, which is the client project, and then we use this full stop, and then we can now see all of the properties within the client's database, and we're going to find the start date. So now what this is saying is from the trigger page, so this client page that is added, find the start date and then add 1 day on top of this. Now that's great, but the problem we have now is if I was to add a client project, the automation would trigger straight away and not give me time to add in the start date, and so the automation would actually fail. So to avoid this, we now need to choose a new trigger that is going to allow us to have time to add the start date before something happens. A simple way to do this is actually to take advantage of a property we probably should have added to this database already, which is a status property. So we have this status property here, and this allows us to see the overall status of the client project. And what I'm going to do is edit this property, and in this in progress phase, I'm going to add a new status called planning. And so now what I can do is in the automation, I'm going to edit it. And instead of saying when the page is added, I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to say the new trigger is when any of the client projects in this database, when the status is set to planning, and then hit done. And so now what this allows me to do is if I add a new client, I can add the client and the database automation isn't going to trigger. I can then go ahead and add the status. So let's say this was for next Monday, and then I can set this to planning. That status change is going to trigger the automation. And so now if I open up this database, I can see I've got task 1 and that the due date has been set to the 22nd, which is 1 day after the official start date. Of course, this is just an example, but we would add all of the different onboarding tasks we have and who they are assigned to with that specific cadence of how we like to complete things based on the start date. And now this means every time that we create a new client project, we have a list of all of the onboarding tasks that we need to get done automatically for us. So if you find this way of learning effective and you'd like to have this for you and your team, you should check out the link down below for our Notion Essentials course. It follows this exact same format to get you and your team up to speed with Notion in less than a day. If you'd like to see how to create automated tasks based on different services, you should also check out this video here or here. And if you enjoyed this video, please do consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye bye.